Now, what I'm about to share with you is what I consider the top 5% of salespeople. The top 5% of salespeople are generating a significant amount of business. And this is part of their secret. They not only help their customers with their needs, opportunities, and problems, but get this. They help them with those needs, opportunities, and problems, even if it means not their product or service. Let me give you an example. 30% of all of the leads that come to me. Hey, Jack, we want you to speak on this. We want you to speak at this company. We want you to speak at this organization. 30% of all of the leads that come into my company, I pass on to other people. Now, that might sound crazy, but here's the backdrop. You see, I will have people call me and say, I want to hire you to speak on customer service. Well, I could do that. I've done it many years ago before, but quite frankly, it's not what I would call my sweet spot. It's not my best use. My best use is to speak on the area of sales. And so there's a person that I have a high regard for. He's in Ohio. His name is John DeJulius. His specialty is customer service. So when someone calls me and says, I'm in pain, my customer service department really needs help. Can you help me, Jack? I say, well, I can, but I think you would be better served if you went over and hired John DeJulius, because he'll get it to you quicker and cheaper and better than I could ever do it. And if I were in your shoes, that's what I would do. Now, I just gave away a sale. And for a lot of salespeople, they're going, well, that's not a smart thing. We could have closed that sale. Yeah, but watch what happens. They're happy with my referral. A year later, they call me back and say, we want you to talk with our salespeople. Perfect. That's what I do. Now, what's interesting about this is that when they called me up and hired me to do the sales training, they didn't call anyone else. And why is that? And the answer to that is a one word, a critical word in sales. That word is trust. Selling is the transfer of trust. People do business with people they trust. You see, a salesperson that is just trying to sell somebody something, they're going to be doing a lot of transactions possibly, but they're not going to nurture a client. They're not going to have a relationship. They're not going to have an ongoing stream of business. An ongoing stream of business comes from what we call a client, someone who regularly and ongoing does a lot of business with you. And if you want to nurture clients, nurture them on a bedrock of trust. Now, here's the best bonus of all, and you guys are going to love this. They didn't call anyone else other than me to do the sales training. Therefore, what did I not have to deal with? Price. And so if you're having price objections tend to come from one of two places. One, you haven't created enough trust. Or two, you haven't created enough perceived value. But if you create enough perceived value in your product or service, and you create enough trust, the price objection tends to diminish, if not entirely disappear. Trust trumps price all day long. And so here it is again. The takeaway on the item number 1 of 5 is ask questions and listen, and don't sell people, help them to buy. Okay, the second piece of learning that I wanted to pass along to you is a one-liner. Sports teams are run better than most businesses. Sports teams are run better than most businesses. And what I'm talking about here is systems and processes. Systems and processes. Let me tell you a story. My largest sales team that I had in my company was 2,600 salespeople selling all over the United States. And we were doing that out of 100 different locations. I would spend time visiting the different locations, and I would say to those salespeople, there aren't 2,600 best ways to sell this stuff. What do you say we find the best way, the best practices? Build the systems and processes that reflect the best processes. Practice the systems and processes. And I bet you we beat the competition hands down. And so, what is the difference between companies and salespeople and sports teams? Well, I can tell you this much. It doesn't matter what your sport is. Your sport could be played on a field. It could be played on a court. It could be played, it could be played anywhere. But there isn't a coach at any level in any sport that would consider putting their players on the field without a playbook, without the systems and processes that will enable that team to win more than they lose. I can also tell you there isn't a coach in any sport at any level that would consider putting their players on the field without proper preparation, training, and practice. Now, 8 years ago, I wrote this best-selling book called Hyper Sales Growth, and it went to the top of the charts. And we were inundated with phone calls from companies. I want you to help me grow my company like this. And what I said to them was, perfect. I need to know how you sell today in order to build the system and process that's the next level. So the easiest thing for you to do is send me your sales playbook. Send me the systems and processes that you currently use to sell today. Get this. 2 out of every 100 companies could send me their sales playbook. 98 out of 100 companies did not have a sales playbook. So here's my message. If you don't have a sales playbook, if you don't have documented best practices on how to sell, if you don't have identification of the objections and the best responses, if you don't have what the particular benefits of your products or services are and the scripts to go along with that, if you don't have documented how to nurture and touch your prospects, customers, and clients, then what I am here to tell you is that every salesperson in your company is selling their own way. It makes no sense. Can you imagine? In my old company with 2,600 salespeople, 2,600 different ways to sell. It is absolute craziness. My second item in summary, build your systems and processes and document them into something I call a sales playbook. Now, that leads me into item number 3 of 5, and that is role practice. No matter where I go in life, whether it's in sport, whether it's in music, whether it's in theater, whether it's in business, what I've learned is this: the very best in every dimension of life got to be best by practicing. We just finished up this past year with an Olympics. Gosh, it's enjoyable to watch those athletes perform at the level that they do. But many of those athletes are performing a function, a sport that lasts a couple, 3 minutes. Think about the gymnast. And how much did they practice in the 5 years since they competed in the Olympic Summer Games? Hours and hours and hours a day practicing that 3-minute, 4-minute exercise to compete for bronze and silver and gold at the Olympics. They're the best because they practiced. Think about golfers on the tour of the professional golf and how few tournaments they enter and how much they spend time practicing. And so the question that I ask you is this: how often, if you're a salesperson, how often are you practicing? In many companies, salespeople are not practicing ever inside their company. And so if you're not practicing inside your company, you're practicing outside your company. And where are you practicing outside your company? On real customers. Sports teams are run better than most businesses. There isn't a coach in any sport that would ever allow their players to play in a game against an opponent without proper preparation, training, and practice. Now, last item that I want to talk about in the practice area is this: if you don't schedule it, it will not get done. If you don't schedule it, it will not get done. So let me show you one example of one of my clients. I have a client that has 38 salespeople, 38. They only sell in the state of Ohio. And pre-pandemic, they would all be behind the wheel of their car, driving from one prospect and one customer to another. Twice a year, the company would bring all 38 together and they would do some practice and some training. When the pandemic hit and we were all locked down into our individual homes, the company thought, we're really going to get hit here. We're not going to be doing very many sales. Our salespeople can't go out in the field and call in customers. But what the CEO did is they decided, what an opportune time to practice. And so what they did is they did practice on Zoom, and they would assign individual rooms to 3 people. And so there are 38 people. They would divide them into separate rooms of 3. One person would be the prospect, one person would be the salesperson, and one person would be the observer. And they would wear different hats and then give feedback on what they found and what they learned. Here's the results. The CEO told me they've had their best year ever. Their salespeople have never been as good as they've been this year. And the reason that they're good is because they're so well prepared. They're so well practiced. Where they weren't able to do it because they were always traveling in their car, now they're able to take this pandemic and turn it into an advantage rather than a disadvantage. And so their salespeople are selling over Zoom, and their salespeople are getting accustomed to doing it over Zoom because that's how they're practicing. And so take this pandemic and not worry about the things that you can't do. But the key that we're finding with successful people selling through the pandemic is they focus on that which they have control of. Focus on the controllables. So the first item was ask questions and listen. The second item was the importance of systems and processes anchored with a playbook. The third important item that I wanted to give you was how critical it is to practice. So now let's go to number 4. We're going to cover 5 topics here. Number 4 is a word that I fell in love with a long time ago. Let me share it with you. And that is a word called leverage. Now, when I talk about leverage, what I'm talking about is not debt and rolling the debt over. Let me give you a definition to write down. Leverage. How can I generate more business with less work? Let's give you another one. This one I like a lot. how can I make more money with less work? That's got to be appealing to an awful lot of people on this summit. Well, we study at our company, we get to study top salespeople all over the world in all different businesses. And what we've discovered is there's a common thread woven in amongst them. They do a lot of similar things. It doesn't matter what industry or country they're in. Let me share with you one of those common threads. They're maniacally focused on what we call HPAs, high payoff activities. That's one of the keys. What we have to understand as salespeople is we only have a limited amount of time. Let me show you the limit in time. Everyone starts the week with the same number of hours, 168. Now, that's plain math. There's 7 days times 24 hours is 168. But we don't really get 168 because if you listen to the doctors, we've got to sleep. In fact, you've got to sleep 8 hours a day times 7 days. That's 56 hours out of this 168 that we're in bed asleep. Now we got to eat. Then maybe we got to exercise. And then you want to spend time with friends and family. And all of a sudden, instead of 168, what you're left with is somewhere between 40 to 60 hours. You have to work very hard to make sure that you're working on the most important things, what I call high payoff activities. So here is one of the action items I want you to consider doing. I want you to take a blank sheet of paper sometime after the summit and divide it into 2 columns. In the left-hand column, what I want you to write is what are your HPAs? What are your high payoff activities? Now, if you're a salesperson, let me give you an example of an HPA. Anything you do to win a new customer or grow the one that you already have. That's what a salesperson's job is. Win new customers, grow the ones you have. So whatever you do that makes that happen goes in this column. In this column, I label it other. And what goes in here is anything that didn't go in here that you're currently doing. Now, here's what we have found going into companies. We study the salespeople, and what we found is more than 50% of a salesperson's time is being spent in this box. So when I'm working with my clients, what we try to do is say, what is this all other column? And what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of it. And one of the ways that you can get rid of it is you can give it to somebody inside the company other than you, the salesperson. Another way is you can hire somebody outside the company to do it. And a third way is you could just stop doing it. And what I want to share with you is this. If that was all you did as a result of my presentation in the summit, if that's all you did, and you were able to get rid of this column and you shifted your time into this column, you could actually double your sales without working an extra hour. That's leverage. How can I generate more business with less work? And the key is to be working on the right things. That's the key. Too many salespeople are working on the wrong activities. Be very guarded about your time. Now, I'll give you one other tip in the area of leverage. Let's give you a second one. And that one I'm going to call model the masters. Model the masters. If you want to do anything well in life, find the people that are already superb at doing what you want to do. Find the top producers. Find the people that are already operating at a level of excellence. Find out what they're doing and do that. That would be my advice. So as an example, many companies, they will have something where they honor and recognize the top salespeople. They'll call it the President's Club. I have a client in the US that has 440 salespeople. And they took all 440 of their salespeople and sent them to Cancun for 5 days as a reward, all 440. And during that sessions, they invited me to spend 3 hours with them. Right before I got on stage, the CEO of the company was honoring the top producers. And they called each person's name. And what they called were about 30 people. Now, I want you to understand something. 30 people out of 440 were recognized as top producers. But when I talked to the CEO of the company, what I found is this. They've been doing this President's Club for 7 years. And in the 7 years, about 25 to 35 people were recognized as top producers. 25 to 35 out of 440, the best of the best. But here's the thing that I really want to make sure that you hear, that 12 of those 30 people were in the President's Club all 7 years. Now think about this. All 440 had the same economy. All 440 had the same pandemic. All 440 had the same competitors. All 440 had the same product. All 440 had the same price. But 12 were recognized as top producers all 7 years. The only way they can do that is if those 12 people are doing something different than all the other people. Here's my advice. Find out what those 12 people were doing. Put it into a playbook. Practice the playbook with 440 salespeople in that company, and you'll really see the sales go up. Model the masters.